The blood-red sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty main street of Black Hawk, Colorado Territory, as Abram Jennings rode in on his exhausted Palomino. The year was 1872, and the mining boom that had once made this town prosperous was beginning to wane, leaving behind a mix of determined settlers and desperate men clinging to fading dreams of fortune. Abram pulled his horse to a stop outside the town's only saloon, his weathered face bearing the marks of 3 days' hard riding and 5 years of harder living. At 32, he had the eyes of a much older man, one who had seen too much of the world's cruelty. His return to Black Hawk hadn't been planned, but the letter burning a hole in his pocket had drawn him back to the place he'd sworn never to revisit. "Didn't expect to see your face around these parts again," called a familiar voice as Abram dismounted. Sheriff Thomas Miller stepped off the wooden boardwalk, thumbs hooked in his belt loops. "Wasn't planning on coming back," Abram replied, his voice rough from trail dust and little use. He patted his horse's neck. "Need to stable him and get some rest." The sheriff nodded, eyes narrowing. "You hear about Hannah?" Abram's jaw tightened. "That's why I'm here. Been 3 months since the fever took her. Left behind quite a situation." The sheriff's voice lowered. "The boy's been staying with Olivia Ellis over at the old Carson place. She was Hannah's friend." Abram absorbed the information silently. The boy, his son, a child he'd never met, born after he'd left, whose existence he'd only learned of in the tear-stained letter Hannah had written on her deathbed. "Where's the Carson place?" he asked. "North edge of town. Small ranch with the white fence." Sheriff Miller studied him. "She's been good to the boy. Don't go stirring up trouble." Abram led his horse toward the livery, feeling the weight of every eye in town following him. Everyone knew who he was and why he'd left. Now they'd be wondering why he'd returned. After tending to his horse, Abram walked through town, ignoring the whispers that followed him. The Carson place was easy enough to find, a modest homestead with a weathered barn and small main house. A vegetable garden flourished along one side, and chickens scratched in a penned yard. He hesitated at the gate, suddenly unsure. What right did he have to be here? To claim a child he hadn't known existed until a month ago. But the alternative, walking away again, wasn't something he could live with. Not anymore. As Abram pushed open the gate, the front door of the house swung wide. A woman stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical bun, though tendrils had escaped to frame her face. She wasn't conventionally beautiful, but something about her arrested him, perhaps the intelligence in her green eyes or the quiet determination in her stance. "Can I help you?" she called, her voice wary but not unfriendly. "Are you Olivia Ellis?" he asked, approaching the porch with his hat in hand. "I am." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "And you would be Abram Jennings." Her expression changed instantly, recognition and wariness crossing her features. "I see." She studied him for a long moment. "Hannah said you might come one day." "I got her letter." His throat tightened. "About the boy, Samuel," Olivia supplied. "His name is Samuel. He's 4 years old. 4 years. His son had been alive for 4 years and he'd never known." "Is he here?" Abram asked, glancing toward the house. "He's playing in the barn." Her voice softened slightly. "He likes the horses." An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Abram cleared his throat. "Sheriff Miller said you've been caring for him since Hannah passed." Olivia nodded. "Hannah was my dearest friend. There was no one else." Her implication hung in the air between them. "No one else because you weren't here." "May I see him?" She hesitated, then nodded. "He doesn't know about you. Hannah never told him much, just that his father was away." She stepped down from the porch. "Follow me." Abram walked beside her toward the barn, acutely aware of her presence. She moved with purpose, her steps sure on the uneven ground. "What did Hannah tell you about me?" he asked quietly. "Enough." Olivia glanced sideways at him. "That you were together for a while. That you left before knowing about Samuel. That you had your reasons." She paused. "She didn't hate you, if that's what you're wondering." It was exactly what he'd been wondering, though he hadn't realized it until she spoke the words. Relief washed through him, followed immediately by crushing guilt. The barn door stood partly open. Olivia pushed it wider, allowing sunlight to spill across the packed dirt floor. "Samuel," she called, "are you in here?" There was no answer. She frowned and stepped inside, Abram following. The barn was cool and smelled of hay and horses. 2 stalls were occupied, one by a sturdy bay mare, the other by a dappled pony. A ladder led to a hayloft above. "He must be up in the loft," she said. "He likes to play up there." She moved toward the ladder, but Abram touched her arm. "May I?" he asked. She studied him for a moment, then nodded and stepped aside. Abram climbed the ladder, his heart hammering against his ribs. At the top, he pulled himself into the hayloft and looked around. Sunshine streamed through gaps in the wooden slats, illuminating dancing dust motes. And there, in a nest of hay, lay a small boy, fast asleep. The sight stole Abram's breath. The child Samuel had dark hair like his own, but his features were softer, reminiscent of Hannah. His small chest rose and fell with each steady breath, one arm flung above his head, the other clutching a wooden horse figurine. Abram knelt beside him, afraid to touch him, afraid to wake him, afraid of the emotion surging through his chest. His son, his flesh and blood. A movement behind him made him turn. Olivia had climbed up and now knelt on the other side of the sleeping child. Without a word, she reached for something tucked beside a bale of hay, a colorful patchwork quilt. With gentle hands, she unfolded it and carefully draped it over the boy, tucking it around his small shoulders. "You made this," Abram whispered, touching the corner of the quilt. The fabric was soft, the stitching meticulous. "Yes," she answered softly. "When Hannah fell ill, I started making it for him. Something to remember her by." Their eyes met over the sleeping child, and something passed between them, an unspoken understanding, perhaps, or the beginning of one. "He looks like you," she said. "Around the eyes especially." Abram swallowed hard. "When will he wake?" "Soon enough." She settled back on her heels. "He always naps in the afternoon. He'll be hungry when he wakes." She studied Abram's face. "You've come to take him, I suppose." It wasn't quite a question, but Abram heard the uncertainty beneath her words. "I've come for him, yes," he confirmed. "But he hesitated. I don't know the first thing about raising a child, and he doesn't know me." "No," she agreed quietly, "he doesn't." "What has he been told about his mother, about me?" Olivia sighed softly. "That his mama went to heaven. That she loves him very much and watches over him. As for you," she met his gaze steadily, "that his father had important work to do far away, but that he loves him too." Abram felt his throat constrict. "You told him I love him." Hannah wanted him to believe that. Her voice was gentle but unflinching. "Was she wrong?" "No," he said hoarsely. "No, she wasn't wrong." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sleeping child. Finally, Abram spoke again. "I have a place. A ranch north of here, about 2 days' ride. It's not much, but it's good land. Safe. And you want to take him there, eventually, when he's ready." Abram looked up at her. "When I'm ready." Olivia nodded slowly. "That seems wise." She hesitated. "He's attached to me. It would be difficult for him if you simply took him away." "I understand that." Abram rubbed a hand across his face. "I was thinking I could stay in town for a while, get to know him, let him get to know me." "There's a room at the boarding house," she suggested. "Mrs. Winters keeps it clean and her cooking is decent. That would work." He looked back at Samuel, watching the steady rise and fall of his small chest beneath the colorful quilt. "I want to do right by him. I know I'm 5 years too late, but I want to try." Something in Olivia's expression softened. Hannah would have wanted that. She stood carefully, mindful not to disturb the sleeping child. "Come, we should let him rest. We can talk more in the house." Abram followed her down the ladder, casting one last glance at his sleeping son before descending. Outside the barn, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard. A cool breeze rustled the leaves of a nearby cottonwood tree. "I don't want to impose," he said as they walked toward the house. "You're not imposing. You're Samuel's father." She glanced at him. "And regardless of the past, that means something." In the kitchen, Olivia busied herself making coffee. Abram sat at the worn wooden table, taking in the humble but well-kept room. Curtains framed the windows, and a vase of wildflowers brightened the sideboard. It felt like a home, not just a house. "How long have you lived here?" he asked. "About 3 years." She set a cup of coffee before him. "I was teaching at the school in town, but when old Mr. Carson passed, he left this place to me. He had no family, and I'd been reading to him during his illness." She smiled slightly. "It was unexpected but welcome. I'd always wanted a place of my own." "You're not married?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. "No." Her answer was simple, unadorned with explanation. Abram nodded, sipping his coffee. It was good, stronger than he expected. "This is good coffee. Thank you." She sat across from him with her own cup. "Now, about Samuel, we should discuss how to introduce you. He's a sensitive child and he's already lost his mother." "I'll follow your lead," Abram said. "You know him better than I do." Olivia seemed surprised by this concession, but nodded. "We could start by telling him you're an old friend of his mother's. Let him get comfortable with you before explaining more." "That sounds sensible." "He'll have questions eventually, about why you weren't here before." Abram's jaw tightened. "What should I tell him?" She considered this. "The truth, but in a way he can understand. That you didn't know about him, but now that you do, you want to be part of his life." "And if he asks why I left his mother?" Olivia's green eyes were steady. "That's something you'll need to decide for yourself, Mr. Jennings." "Abram," he corrected. "Please." "Abram," she acknowledged with a slight nod. A soft sound from the doorway made them both turn. Samuel stood there, the colorful quilt clutched in one hand, the wooden horse in the other. His dark hair was tousled from sleep, his eyes Abram's eyes wide and curious. "Livy," he said, his voice small and sleepy, "I'm hungry." Olivia rose immediately. "Of course you are, sweet boy." "I'll fix you something." She gestured toward Abram. "We have a visitor. This is Mr. Jennings. He knew your mama." Samuel's gaze shifted to Abram, assessing him with the frank curiosity of childhood. "You knew my mama?" Abram's throat went dry. He nodded. "Yes, I did. She was very special." The boy nodded solemnly. "She's in heaven now." "Yes, she is." Abram's voice roughened. "I'm sorry about that." Samuel approached the table, still clutching his quilt and wooden horse. "This is Thunder," he said, holding up the horse. "Livy gave him to me for my birthday." "He's a fine horse," Abram said, unsure how to talk to this small person who was half himself. "You have a real horse?" Samuel asked. "I do." "A Palomino named Buck." Samuel's eyes widened. "Is he fast?" "Very fast," Abram confirmed, feeling on slightly firmer ground. "And smart, too." "Can I see him?" Olivia intervened gently. "Perhaps tomorrow, Samuel. Mr. Jennings has had a long journey and needs to rest, and you need your supper." She set a plate with bread, cheese, and an apple before the boy. "Eat up now." Samuel climbed onto a chair, setting his wooden horse carefully beside his plate. "Are you staying for supper too, Mr. Jennings?" Abram glanced at Olivia, uncertain. She gave a small nod. "If Miss Ellis doesn't mind, I'd be honored to join you." "We have plenty," she assured him. "Though it's nothing fancy, just stew and biscuits." "That sounds perfect." Abram watched as Samuel bit into his apple, juice running down his small chin. Olivia handed him a napkin without comment, and the boy wiped his face with the practiced motion of one who had been reminded many times. The domesticity of the scene struck Abram forcefully. This could have been his life, should have been his life. A home, a family, simple meals around a table. Instead, he'd spent the last 5 years roaming, taking odd jobs and trying to outrun his past. All for what? "Mr. Jennings, are you a cowboy?" Samuel asked, interrupting Abram's thoughts. "Yes, I suppose I am." "Do you have a gun?" The boy's eyes gleamed with excitement. "Samuel," Olivia admonished gently, "that's not a polite question." "It's all right," Abram said. "Yes, I have a gun, but I don't use it much, mostly for hunting or protection when I'm traveling." "Have you ever shot a bad guy?" Samuel persisted. Abram's stomach tightened. "No," he lied, meeting Olivia's eyes briefly. "I've never had to do that." She held his gaze for a moment, then turned to stir the pot of stew simmering on the stove. Abram wondered what she knew about his past, what Hannah had told her. The evening passed more easily than Abram had expected. Samuel was full of questions about horses, cattle, and life on the trail. Olivia interjected occasionally, guiding the conversation away from more difficult topics, and ensuring Samuel ate his supper despite his excitement over their visitor. After the meal, Samuel reluctantly agreed to prepare for bed, though he extracted a promise from Abram to return the next day and show him Buck. "I'll be back tomorrow," Abram assured him, surprised by the rush of feeling that accompanied the promise. Once Samuel had been tucked into bed, Olivia walked Abram to the door. The night had fallen, stars pricking the velvet darkness above. "You did well with him," she said quietly. "He's an easy child to talk to." "He is." She hesitated. "Will you really come back tomorrow?" "I promised him I would." Abram settled his hat on his head. "And I mean to keep my promises from now on." Olivia nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Good night then, Mr. Jennings." "Abram," he reminded her. "Abram," she conceded with a small smile. "Good night." As he walked back toward town in the darkness, Abram felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of purpose, of rightness. The weight of his past remained, but alongside it had grown something new, the determination to be the father his son deserved, no matter what it took. The following days established a pattern. Abram would arrive at the Carson place in the morning, spend the day with Samuel always under Olivia's watchful eye, and return to the boarding house in the evening. Samuel quickly warmed to him, delighted by Abram's knowledge of horses and his willingness to answer endless questions about the world beyond Black Hawk. On the 4th day, Olivia suggested Abram take Samuel fishing. "There's a good spot just beyond the west pasture," she said. "The brook has plenty of trout this time of year." "Are you sure?" Abram asked, surprised by the offer to let him take the boy alone. "He needs to spend time with you," she said simply, "and I have preserves to put up." So Abram found himself leading Samuel along a narrow path through the meadow, fishing poles over their shoulders, the boy chattering excitedly about the giant fish he planned to catch. "Livy says I'm getting to be a good fisherman," Samuel informed him proudly. "Last time I caught 3 fish all by myself." "That's impressive," Abram said, smiling at the boy's enthusiasm. "My pa taught me to fish when I was about your age." "Really?" Samuel looked up at him with interest. "Where is your pa now?" "He died when I was 16, Abram said, the old grief muted by time. "He was a good man, worked hard all his life, like you." Abram hesitated. "I try to be like him. He was better at it than I am." They reached the brook, a clear stream bubbling over smooth stones. Abram helped Samuel bait his hook, then settled beside him on a flat rock by the water's edge. "Livy says my mama knew you a long time ago," Samuel said suddenly, watching his fishing line trail in the water. Abram's heart skipped. "That's right. Were you friends?" "Yes," Abram said carefully. "Good friends." Samuel nodded, accepting this. "Mama had yellow hair, do you remember?" "I do," Abram said, his throat tight. "Golden like sunshine, and she had the prettiest smile." "I don't remember her smile much," Samuel admitted. "Just a little bit." "She loved you very much," Abram said. "More than anything in the world." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the gurgling of the brook and occasional birdsong. Samuel's line suddenly jerked. "I got one," he cried, jumping to his feet. Abram helped him reel in a respectable-sized trout, praising the boy's patience and skill. Samuel beamed with pride, his earlier questions forgotten in the excitement of his catch. By the time they returned to the house, Samuel had caught 2 fish, and Abram had added 3 more to their string. Olivia was in the garden, gathering vegetables for dinner. "Look, Livy," Samuel called, running ahead to show her his catch. "I caught the biggest one all by myself." Olivia straightened, brushing dirt from her hands. "My goodness, that is a fine fish. You must be becoming an expert fisherman." Samuel nodded seriously. "Mr. Jennings says I have natural talent." Olivia's eyes met Abram's over the boy's head, warm with shared amusement. "Well, Mr. Jennings would know about such things," she agreed. "These will make a wonderful supper, thank you both." That evening, as they sat around the table enjoying the fruits of their expedition, Abram found himself studying Olivia. She laughed at something Samuel said, her green eyes crinkling at the corners, her usually reserved expression open and warm. She was beautiful in that moment, not in the conventional way that Hannah had been beautiful, but in a deeper, more substantial way that he found increasingly compelling. She caught him watching and raised an eyebrow in silent question. Abram shook his head slightly, embarrassed at being caught staring. After Samuel was in bed, they sat on the porch, the evening cool but pleasant. Stars blanketed the sky above, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. "He had a wonderful time today," Olivia said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "So did I." Abram leaned back in his chair. "He's a remarkable child." "Yes, he is." She glanced at him. "You're good with him. Natural, like you've been doing it for years." "That's kind of you to say, but I'm just figuring it out as I go." He hesitated. "I've been thinking about what happens next. I can't stay at the boarding house forever." "No," she agreed. "Have you decided when you'll take him to your ranch?" "That's what I wanted to discuss with you." He turned to face her more directly. "Samuel has a good life here. He has you and he's settled. Taking him away seems wrong somehow." Olivia's expression was unreadable in the dim light. "What are you suggesting?" "I don't know exactly." Abram ran a hand through his hair. "I just know I want to be part of his life, and I don't want to uproot him completely." "You could stay in Black Hawk," she suggested. "Find work here." "I could," he agreed, "but my ranch, it's good land with potential. I've put 3 years into building it up." He paused. "I was wondering if you might consider coming with us." Olivia went still. "Coming with you to your ranch. You could have your own cabin," he added quickly. "I built a small one for when I have ranch hands staying over. It's not fancy, but it's solid. And there's plenty of good land for a garden, better than here even. Samuel would have you nearby while he adjusts. And Mr. Jennings," she interrupted, her voice carefully controlled. "What exactly are you proposing?" Abram realized how his suggestion must sound. I don't mean," he stopped, gathering his thoughts. "I'm proposing a practical arrangement for Samuel's sake. You clearly care for him and he needs you. I'm not asking for anything else." "I see." Her voice was cool now. And what would my role be exactly? Nursemaid? Housekeeper? No, of course not, Abram protested. You'd be, you'd be Olivia, just as you are here, independent but part of Samuel's life. She was silent for a long moment. It's a generous offer, she said finally, but this is my home. I can't simply leave it to follow you to a ranch I've never seen, based on a practical arrangement that has no defined boundaries or expectations. Abram felt a flush of embarrassment. He hadn't thought it through from her perspective. You're right, he acknowledged. It was presumptuous of me. Yes, it was, but her voice had softened slightly. I understand your concern for Samuel, but there are other solutions we might consider. Such as, perhaps you could relocate your operation closer to Black Hawk, she suggested. Or we could arrange for Samuel to spend part of his time with each of us. Neither option appealed to Abram. The thought of being separated from his son now that he'd found him was painful, and his ranch was too remote and valuable to abandon. But Olivia was right, he couldn't expect her to uproot her life for his convenience. I'll think about it, he promised. There must be a way that works for all of us. The next morning, Abram arrived at the Carson place to find Samuel sitting on the porch steps, clutching his wooden horse and looking forlorn. Olivia was nowhere in sight. What's wrong, partner? Abram asked, sitting beside the boy. Livy's sick, Samuel said, his lower lip trembling. She's in bed and her face is all hot, and she said I should play outside, but I don't want to play by myself. Alarmed, Abram glanced toward the house. She's feverish, Samuel nodded miserably. She said it's just a summer chill, but she sounded funny, like her throat hurts. I see. Abram stood up. Wait here for a moment, Samuel. I'm going to check on Miss Ellis. Inside, the house was quiet. Abram knocked gently on the bedroom door. Samuel, I told you I'm fine, came Olivia's voice, weaker than normal. Please go play. It's Abram, he called. May I come in? A moment of silence then. Yes, come in. Abram pushed open the door to find Olivia propped up in bed, her face flushed with fever, her hair loose around her shoulders. Despite her obvious illness, the sight of her hair unbound struck him with unexpected force. It was longer than he'd realized, falling in waves past her shoulders. You should be resting, she said, attempting to sound firm despite her hoarse voice. So should you, he countered, approaching the bed. Samuel says you're feverish. It's nothing serious. She tried to sit up straighter but winced. Abram reached out and gently pressed the back of his hand to her forehead. She was burning up. This isn't nothing serious. Have you sent for the doctor? There's no need, there absolutely is, he interrupted. I'm going to take Samuel to Mrs. Winters at the boarding house, then fetch Doc Harris. Olivia started to protest, but a fit of coughing overtook her. When she could speak again, her resistance had weakened. Samuel has never stayed with Mrs. Winters. He'll be frightened. I'll stay with him, Abram assured her, the whole time. But you need rest and medical attention. She relented with a weary nod. My sewing basket, she said, gesturing to a corner of the room. There's money in the bottom, for the doctor. Don't worry about that now. Abram moved to the wash basin, wet a cloth, and brought it back to place on her forehead. Just rest. I'll take care of everything. Her green eyes, bright with fever, studied his face. Why are you doing this? The question caught him off guard. Because you need help, he said simply. And because you've been caring for my son when I should have been here to do it. She closed her eyes, the damp cloth seeming to provide some relief. Thank you, she murmured. Abram explained the situation to Samuel, who was understandably worried about Livy being sick, but excited about the adventure of staying at the boarding house. Mrs. Winters, a kindly widow who ran the establishment with brisk efficiency, agreed to prepare a room for the boy. Poor Miss Ellis, she clucked sympathetically. There's been some summer fever going around. The Hanson children were down with it last week. Did they recover quickly? Abram asked, concerned. Oh yes, a few days of rest and they were right as rain. Mrs. Winters patted Samuel's head. Don't you worry, young man. Your Miss Ellis will be fine, and you and your pa can stay here as long as needed. Abram didn't correct her assumption about his relationship to Samuel. Instead, he left the boy happily exploring his temporary lodgings and rode to fetch Doc Harris, the town's elderly physician. The doctor confirmed Mrs. Winters' assessment: a summer fever, unpleasant but rarely dangerous in healthy adults. Keep her cool, make sure she drinks plenty of water and this tonic 3 times a day, he instructed, leaving a dark bottle of medicine. She should turn the corner in a couple of days. For the next 3 days, Abram divided his time between caring for Olivia and entertaining Samuel. Mrs. Winters proved invaluable, watching the boy when Abram needed to tend to Olivia, and providing nourishing meals for all of them. On the morning of the 4th day, Abram arrived at the Carson place to find Olivia sitting up in a chair by the window, wrapped in a shawl despite the summer warmth. Her face was still pale, but the fevered flush had subsided. You look better, he observed, setting a basket of Mrs. Winters' fresh bread on the table. I feel better, she confirmed. Still weak, but the fever broke last night. She looked up at him. How is Samuel? Thriving, Abram assured her with a smile. Mrs. Winters has been spoiling him with cookies and stories, and I've been teaching him to play checkers. Thank you, Olivia said softly, for taking care of him, for taking care of everything. It was the least I could do. Abram sat in the chair opposite her. You've been doing it alone for months, she smiled faintly. Not entirely alone. The town has been kind, but yes, it's been challenging at times. I've been thinking, Abram said, leaning forward, about what we discussed before you fell ill. About Samuel's future. Olivia's expression became guarded. And I still believe my ranch would be a good place for him to grow up, but I understand now that asking you to give up your home was unfair. He paused. So I'm considering selling my ranch and buying land closer to Black Hawk. We could build something new, something that would be Samuel's inheritance. Surprise flickered across her face. You do that, give up the land you've worked for 3 years, for my son. Yes, Abram's voice was steady. The land matters to me, but he matters more. Olivia was quiet for a long moment. That's admirable, she said finally, but still complicated. Samuel needs stability, consistency. I agree. Which is why Abram hesitated, then pressed on. Which is why I think we should consider another option. What option? Marriage. The word hung between them, startling in its directness. Olivia stared at him, momentarily speechless. Marriage, she repeated when she found her voice. To you, it would solve the practical problems, Abram hurried to explain. Samuel would have both of us in his life. You wouldn't have to leave your home. We could expand this place, make it work for all of us. Marriage isn't a practical problem to be solved, Mr. Jennings, Olivia said, her voice cool despite her weakened state. It's a sacred commitment between 2 people who love each other. I know that, Abram said, feeling increasingly awkward. I'm not suggesting that is, I'm not proposing a marriage without regard. I admire you greatly, Miss Ellis. Your strength, your kindness, the way you care for Samuel. In time, perhaps we could. Please stop. Olivia held up a hand. You're suggesting we marry for Samuel's sake, hoping that love might follow. But what if it doesn't? What then? I believe it would, Abram said quietly. For my part, at least. Color rose in Olivia's cheeks, but whether from anger, embarrassment, or something else, Abram couldn't tell. You barely know me, she pointed out. I know enough. He met her gaze steadily. I know you're the kind of woman who takes in her friend's orphan child without hesitation, who sews a quilt to help a little boy remember his mother, who puts others' needs before her own always. Those things don't make me a suitable wife. They make you the kind of person I'd be honored to build a life with, Abram countered. The rest can grow with time. Olivia looked away out the window toward the distant mountains. I need time to think, she said finally. This isn't a decision to make lightly. Of course. Abram stood. Take all the time you need. I should get back to Samuel. He'll be wondering where I am. Bring him to visit tomorrow, Olivia said. I've missed him. I will. Abram paused at the door. For what it's worth, I meant what I said. Every word. The next few days established a new routine. Olivia regained her strength gradually, and Samuel divided his time between the Carson place and the boarding house. Abram continued to care for both of them, never pressing Olivia for an answer to his proposal, though it weighed on his mind constantly. A week after her recovery, Olivia asked Abram to walk with her after supper. Samuel was tucked safely in bed, exhausted from a day of helping Abram repair the chicken coop. They walked in silence through the meadow, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Fireflies began to emerge, their gentle lights blinking in the gathering dusk. I've been thinking about your proposal, Olivia said finally, her voice calm. Abram's heart quickened. And I have concerns. She stopped walking and turned to face him. You left Hannah. You left Black Hawk. What's to say you won't leave again when things become difficult? The question stung, but Abram recognized its fairness. I can't change the past, he acknowledged, but I can tell you why I left if you want to know. I do want to know. Abram took a deep breath. I was working as a deputy sheriff back then. There was a gang causing trouble in the county, the Mercer brothers. They robbed the bank in Leadville, killed 2 people. We tracked them to an abandoned mine outside Black Hawk. He paused, the memory still painful. There was a shootout. I killed one of them, the youngest. He couldn't have been more than 17. Olivia's expression softened slightly. It was your duty. Maybe, but afterward I couldn't sleep, couldn't look at myself in the mirror. Hannah tried to help, but I was broken inside. I thought leaving would be better for her. That she deserved someone whole. He looked away. I was a coward. And now, Olivia asked quietly, are you still running? No, Abram met her gaze. I'm done running. Samuel brought me back, but even if he hadn't, it was time to stop. Olivia nodded, considering his words. I have another concern. You've spoken of practical arrangements and solving problems. But a marriage built only on practicality is a cold thing. I've seen such marriages. They may function, but they don't thrive. You're right, Abram admitted, and I've expressed myself poorly. The truth is. He hesitated, then decided honesty was the only path forward. The truth is, I find myself thinking of you even when we're apart, wondering what you're doing, what you're thinking. Admiring your strength, your kindness, your quiet dignity. That's not practicality, Olivia. That's the beginning of something more. Her eyes widened slightly. I see. I'm not asking you to love me now, he continued, emboldened by her lack of outright rejection. I'm asking for the chance to earn your love day by day. To build something real together, for Samuel's sake at first, but ultimately for our own. Fireflies danced around them in the deepening twilight. Olivia's face was thoughtful, her eyes reflecting the last golden light of day. Yes, she said finally. Abram blinked, uncertain he'd heard correctly. Yes, I'll marry you. A small smile touched her lips. Not for practical reasons, though there are many, and not because I love you yet, though I believe I could in time. She stepped closer to him. I'll marry you because you came back, because you're trying to do right by Samuel. Because when I was ill, you cared for me without hesitation. And because when you look at me, I feel seen, truly seen. Joy rushed through Abram, so intense it almost hurt. Without thinking, he reached for her, drawing her into his arms. She came willingly, her body fitting against his as if made to be there. Hesitantly, he lowered his head, giving her time to pull away if she wished. She didn't. Instead, she tilted her face up to his, and their lips met in a gentle, tentative kiss. It was brief, a promise rather than a passion, but Abram felt it to his core. "We should tell Samuel," Olivia said when they parted, her cheeks flushed. "Tomorrow," Abram agreed, "and then we should speak to Reverend Peterson about the ceremony." They walked back to the house hand in hand, the future stretching before them, uncertain in many ways, but full of possibility. The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the small church in Black Hawk. It was a simple affair, Olivia in a dove-gray dress with lace at the collar, Abram in his best suit, Samuel proudly serving as ring-bearer. The town turned out for the occasion, curious about the union but mostly supportive. "You look beautiful," Abram whispered as they stood before Reverend Peterson. Olivia smiled, a hint of nervousness in her eyes but determination in the set of her shoulders. "Thank you," she murmured back. The ceremony was brief, the vows traditional. When Reverend Peterson pronounced them husband and wife, Abram kissed Olivia with gentle reverence, aware of the watching eyes but caring only for the woman who had agreed to share his life. Afterward, there was a modest reception at the boarding house with Mrs. Winters providing a feast that would be talked about for months. Samuel, overexcited by the day's events, fell asleep under a table and had to be carried home by his new father. That night, after tucking Samuel into bed in what was now their shared home, Abram and Olivia faced each other in the bedroom that was now theirs. Awkwardness hung between them, the reality of their situation suddenly stark. "We don't have to," Abram began. "I know," Olivia interrupted. "But I want to. We're married now, truly and completely." She reached for the pins in her hair, removing them one by one until her chestnut waves fell loose around her shoulders. Abram watched, transfixed, as she began to unfasten the buttons of her dress. "May I?" he asked, stepping closer. She nodded, turning so he could reach the buttons that ran down her back. His fingers trembled slightly as he worked them free, revealing the white chemise beneath. The intimacy of the moment was overwhelming, this strong, independent woman trusting herself to him. Their coming together that night was tender and unhurried, a discovery rather than a conquest. Abram was gentle, mindful of Olivia's inexperience, and she was braver than she'd expected to be, guided by instinct and the growing trust between them. Afterward, as they lay tangled in the sheets, Olivia's head pillowed on his chest, Abram felt a sense of peace he'd thought lost to him forever. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. "Yes," she replied, her voice drowsy. "I'm more than all right." He stroked her hair, marveling at its softness. "I'll be a good husband to you," he promised. "I'll make you happy if I can." She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him in the dim light. "I believe you will," she said, "and I'll try to be a good wife. It's a new role for me. I've been independent for so long." "I wouldn't want to change that about you," Abram assured her. "Your strength, your independence, they're part of who you are, part of what I admire." She smiled and settled back against him. "We should sleep. Samuel will be up at dawn, full of questions about our new family." "Our family," Abram repeated, the words filling him with wonder. "I like the sound of that." The adjustment to married life wasn't without its challenges. Olivia, accustomed to making decisions alone, sometimes bristled at having to consider Abram's perspective. Abram, used to the solitary life of a rancher, occasionally found the constant companionship overwhelming. But through it all, Samuel thrived, secure in the love of both his father and the woman he still called Livy, but was beginning to think of as a mother. A month after the wedding, Abram rode out to his ranch to check on things. He'd left a hired hand in charge, but he needed to make decisions about the property's future. The 2-day ride gave him time to think, to consider what he truly wanted for his family. When he returned, he found Olivia in the garden, harvesting late summer vegetables. She straightened when she saw him, pushing a strand of hair from her face, and the sight of her strong, capable, beautiful in the afternoon sunlight made his heart swell. "Welcome home," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "How was your ranch?" "As well as can be expected," he replied, dismounting. "The cattle are healthy, the crops decent." He took off his hat, turning it in his hands. "I've made a decision if you're willing to hear it." Curiosity flickered in her eyes. "Of course. I want to keep the ranch," he said, "but I don't want to move you and Samuel there. This is your home, and I've come to think of it as mine too." He looked around at the modest homestead. "What I'm proposing is that we expand this place. Use the money from selling some of my cattle to add onto the house, improve the barn, maybe buy the adjacent parcel that's been sitting empty. We could build something here, something that combines the best of both our lives." Olivia studied him for a moment. "And your ranch?" "I'd keep it as an investment, hire a foreman to run it, visit occasionally to check on things." He stepped closer to her. "My life is here now, with you and Samuel." A slow smile spread across her face. "I think that's a wonderful idea," she said. "This land has always had potential. With your experience and my determination." She laughed softly. "We could build something remarkable. Is that a yes?" "Yes," she confirmed. "It's a yes." That night, as they lay in bed, Olivia curled against Abram's side, she asked the question that had been on her mind since his return. "Do you miss it? The freedom of the ranch, the life you had before?" Abram considered the question seriously. "I miss parts of it," he admitted. "The open spaces, the simplicity. But it was a lonely life, Olivia, empty in ways I didn't even recognize until now." He tightened his arm around her. "What I have here, what we're building together, it's worth more than all the freedom in the world." She was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "I used to think I needed to be entirely self-sufficient," she said finally. "That depending on anyone else was a weakness. But there's strength in this too, isn't there? In building something together." "The greatest strength," Abram agreed, "and the greatest joy." As autumn painted the Colorado landscape in gold and crimson, the Jennings homestead began to transform. Abram hired men from town to help him add 2 rooms to the house, a larger bedroom for Samuel, and a study that could double as a guest room when needed. Olivia planted apple trees along the south side of the property, a long-term investment in their future. Samuel, delighted by all the activity, followed Abram everywhere, helping with the construction and peppering the workers with questions. His vocabulary expanded rapidly, and he showed a quick mind for numbers and mechanical concepts. "He's so much like you," Olivia remarked one evening as they watched Samuel carefully construct a model barn from scraps of wood Abram had given him. "He has your patience, though," Abram observed, "and your kindness." Olivia smiled, laying her hand over his. "He has the best of both of us, I think. And of Hannah, too, of course." The mention of Hannah no longer brought pain, just a gentle acknowledgement of the woman who had given them their son. They spoke of her often to Samuel, ensuring he would remember his birth mother even as he grew closer to Olivia. As winter approached, bringing the first dusting of snow to the mountains, Abram completed the addition to the barn, a workshop where he could repair equipment and teach Samuel the skills he would need as he grew. The homestead was taking shape, becoming more than either of them had envisioned when they began. One crisp December morning, Olivia came to find Abram in the workshop. Her face was pale, but there was a glow about her that caught his attention immediately. "Is everything all right?" he asked, setting aside the bridle he was mending. "Yes," she said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "More than all right, actually. I've just come from seeing Doc Harris." Concern flashed through Abram. "Are you ill?" "No." Her smile widened. "I'm with child. Due in early summer, he thinks." The news hit Abram like a physical force. He stared at her, momentarily speechless, then crossed the workshop in 3 long strides and gathered her in his arms. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby." "Yes," she confirmed, her arms tightening around him. "Our family is growing." That evening they told Samuel he would be a big brother. The boy's eyes widened with excitement. "Will it be a boy or a girl?" he demanded. "We won't know until the baby arrives," Olivia explained. Samuel considered this information solemnly. "I hope it's a boy," he decided. "Then I can teach him to fish and ride horses." "You could teach a sister those things too," Abram pointed out. Samuel looked dubious but didn't argue. Instead, he patted Olivia's still flat stomach gently. "Hello, baby," he said. "I'm your big brother Samuel. I'm going to teach you lots of things when you get here." Watching them, Abram felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. This was his family, the son he'd almost lost, the wife he'd never expected to find, the child growing beneath her heart. He'd been given a second chance at happiness, and he intended to cherish every moment of it. The winter passed in a blur of quiet domesticity and preparations for the baby. Olivia sewed tiny garments in the evenings, her needle flashing in the lamplight. Abram built a cradle, carefully carving designs of leaves and flowers into the wooden headboard. Samuel talked endlessly about his future sibling, alternating between excitement and the occasional moment of jealousy that Olivia and Abram handled with gentle reassurance of his important place in their hearts. Spring brought new life to the land, green shoots pushing through the soil, calves and foals being born on neighboring farms, wildflowers dotting the meadows. Olivia's body changed with the season, her belly growing round with their child. Abram found her more beautiful than ever, her skin glowing, her movements slower but filled with purpose. One evening in late May, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Olivia took Abram's hand and placed it on her stomach. Beneath his palm, he felt a strong kick. "Active tonight," he remarked with a smile. "Very," she agreed. "I think this one might be as stubborn as its father," Abram chuckled, "or as determined as its mother." Olivia leaned her head against his shoulder. "I never thought I'd have this," she admitted softly. "A husband, children, a true home. I'd resign myself to a different life." "Are you happy with how things turned out instead?" he asked, suddenly needing to hear her answer. She looked up at him, her green eyes serious. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she said. "I love you, Abram Jennings. I love our life together." The words, though he'd hoped for them, caught him by surprise. It was the first time she'd said them so directly. "I love you too," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "More than I can say." Their kiss was interrupted by Samuel bursting out of the house, clutching a drawing he'd made of their family stick figures of varying sizes, with Olivia's figure notably round in the middle. "Look what I made," he announced proudly. "It's wonderful," Olivia praised, making room for him on the bench between them. "You've captured us perfectly." Samuel beamed, then frowned slightly. "But I don't know what the baby looks like yet. I'll have to add that part later." "You certainly will," Abram agreed, ruffling the boy's dark hair. "Not too much longer now." In early June, on a night filled with summer stars, Olivia went into labor. Mrs. Winters came to stay with Samuel while Abram rode for Doc Harris. By the time they returned, Olivia's pains were coming fast and strong. "First babies often take their time," Doc Harris remarked, "but this one seems eager to join the world." Abram paced outside the bedroom, listening to Olivia's muffled cries with growing anxiety. Each sound tore at his heart, reminding him of the risks of childbirth, even in these modern times of 1873. Just before dawn, a new cry pierced the quiet house, the indignant wail of a newborn taking its first breath. Abram froze, his heart pounding, until Doc Harris opened the door, his wrinkled face split in a wide grin. "Congratulations, Mr. Jennings," he said. "You have a daughter, a strong, healthy girl with a fine set of lungs." Relief and joy washed through Abram in equal measure. "And Olivia?" "Tired but well," the doctor assured him. "She's asking for you." Inside the bedroom, Olivia sat propped against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face drawn with exhaustion but radiant with triumph. In her arms, wrapped in the same colorful quilt she had once made for Samuel, lay a tiny bundle with a shock of dark hair. "Come meet your daughter," Olivia said softly. Abram approached the bed on unsteady legs, overwhelmed by the sight before him. The baby was so small, so perfect pink and wrinkled and absolutely beautiful. "Would you like to hold her?" Olivia asked. Nodding, Abram carefully took his daughter into his arms, marveling at her delicate features, her tiny fists, the perfect miniature fingernails. She blinked up at him with unfocused dark blue eyes, and he was lost as completely and irrevocably in love as he had been when he first saw Samuel asleep in the barn. "She's perfect," he whispered. "What shall we name her?" Olivia asked. They had discussed options but hadn't settled on a choice. Abram looked from his daughter to his wife, feeling a completeness he'd never imagined possible. "What about Hannah?" he suggested, "to honor the woman who brought Samuel into our lives." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. "Hannah," she repeated, tasting the name. "Yes, I think that's perfect." Hannah Grace Jennings. Later that morning, Mrs. Winters brought a sleepy but excited Samuel to meet his sister. The boy approached the cradle cautiously, peering at the sleeping infant with wide-eyed wonder. "She's very small," he observed in a whisper. "She'll grow," Abram assured him. "And she'll need her big brother to look out for her and teach her things." Samuel nodded solemnly, accepting the responsibility. "I'll be the best big brother ever," he promised. Standing beside the cradle, his son's small hand in his newborn daughter sleeping peacefully, his wife resting in the next room, Abram felt a sense of completion. The broken pieces of his life had been mended, not erased but transformed into something stronger, more beautiful for having been repaired. As summer ripened into autumn, and autumn yielded to another winter, the Jennings family settled into the rhythm of their expanded household. Hannah grew from a helpless infant into a curious, crawling baby with her mother's green eyes and her father's determined chin. Samuel proved to be an attentive, if sometimes overzealous, big brother, always eager to show his baby new discoveries. Abram and Olivia worked side by side to improve their homestead, adding a schoolroom where Olivia could teach both their children and eventually others from neighboring farms. Their garden expanded, and the apple trees bore their first small crop. Abram made regular trips to check on his ranch, but always returned eager to be home with his family. One winter evening, nearly 2 years after their marriage, Abram found Olivia in Samuel's room after the children were asleep. She stood beside the boy's bed watching him sleep, a familiar patchwork quilt clutched in her hands. "That's the quilt," Abram said softly, coming to stand beside her. "The one you covered him with that day in the barn." Olivia nodded, running her fingers over the colorful squares. "It's getting worn," she said, "but he still asks for it every night." "I'll never forget that moment," Abram admitted, "climbing up into the hayloft, seeing him sleeping there, and then watching you cover him so tenderly." He slipped his arm around her waist. I think I started falling in love with you right then, though I didn't recognize it. She leaned against him. I was terrified that day, she confessed. Terrified you'd take him away, that I'd lose the only family I had left. And instead I gained so much more. She turned in his arms, looking up at him with eyes full of love. A husband I adore, a daughter we created together, a future I never dared to imagine. Abram kissed her gently, then more deeply, still amazed after all this time that this remarkable woman had chosen him, had built a life with him despite his past mistakes. "Let's go to bed," he murmured against her lips. "The children will have us up at dawn." As they walked hand in hand to their bedroom, Abram reflected on the journey that had brought them here. 5 years ago, he'd been a broken man running from his past. 3 years ago, a letter had called him back to face the son he hadn't known existed. And now, against all odds, he was complete husband, father, rancher, at peace with himself and his place in the world outside. Snow began to fall, covering the Colorado landscape in a blanket of white. But inside the Jennings home, all was warmth and love, a family forged not by blood alone, but by choice, by commitment, by the daily decision to build something that would endure. And it all began with a cowboy finding his son sleeping in a barn, and a woman who covered the child with a quilt she'd sewn herself. Years passed, seasons changing like the pages of a book. Samuel grew tall and strong, inheriting his father's skill with horses and his mother's thoughtful nature. Hannah became a lively, independent girl with a talent for drawing and an uncanny ability to calm even the most fractious animals. And in the spring of 1876, Olivia gave birth to their third child, a sturdy son they named William Thomas, after both their fathers. The homestead expanded with their family. Abram added more land, more cattle, more opportunities. Olivia's schoolroom became the heart of education for children from miles around, her reputation as a patient but demanding teacher spreading throughout the county. Together, they built not just a home but a legacy, one founded on second chances, on forgiveness, on the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Abram took Olivia back to the meadow where he had first proposed. Wildflowers carpeted the ground, and the brook still sang its endless song over smooth stones. "You remember what you said to me here?" he asked, holding her close as the setting sun painted the world in gold. "I said yes," she replied with a smile. "Best decision I ever made." "You took a chance on me," Abram said, his voice thick with emotion. "On us. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." Olivia reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the lines that time had etched around his eyes. "I have never regretted a single moment," she assured him. "Not one." As they walked home hand in hand through the gathering dusk, the lights of their home beckoned in the distance, windows glowing with warmth, children's voices carrying on the evening air, the promise of tomorrow waiting just beyond the horizon. And in the old barn, carefully preserved among Samuel's treasured possessions, lay a faded patchwork quilt, a testament to the day, a woman's compassion, and a father's love began weaving together the fabric of a family that would stand the test of time.